Thank you all for coming and thank you for inviting me. Um, this talk I prepared a couple of months ago, and it's called Team Human Community Rooted AI Research. So I'm not sure how many of you in the room have heard the term AGI, Artificial General Intelligence. Show of hands, if I can see. Okay, just like it seems like not that many people, right? Is that correct? Or is it a lot of people? Now I can't tell. I think it's not that many people. So AGI, artificial general intelligence, it seems to me that's like what a lot of people are talking about in AI. And so the question is, what is it? So OpenAI, whose mission is to develop AGI, it says highly autonomous systems that outperform humans at most economically valuable work. Okay. Peter Voss, who says he's one of the people who coined the term, says a computer system that matches or exceeds the real-time cognitive, not physical abilities of a smart, well-educated human. All right. Then we have Russell and Norvig. This is a famous book on AI from a while ago. And they say AGI is a universal algorithm for learning and acting under any environment. Excuse me. And this one is from the first book on AGI that I could find, the first book dedicated to the topic. It says it is a software program that can solve a variety of complex problems in a variety of different domains, and that controls itself autonomously with its own thoughts, worries, feelings, strengths, weaknesses, and predispositions. So after seeing all this stuff, to me, this is what it sounds like. To me, AGI sounds kind of like a god. Can do anything, for anybody under any circumstance, and that seems to be what people want to build. So they also say it's not a fully well-defined term. They still want to build it. And so the question is why, right? Why do they want to build this thing that sounds like sort of like a god, but that doesn't have a specific definition, that everybody defines differently, that they say is not well defined? So I started going down this rabbit hole because it wasn't always like this in my field. It wasn't that the whole field was going towards this, trying to build something that sounds like a god. And so all of a sudden I couldn't get away from it. And it was worrisome that even if I could just wanted to ignore what was going on and just do my thing, all organizations seem to be sort of pivoting into it, all funding and everything. So I wanted to understand why. So this is, unfortunately, the short answer is that it is rooted in the 20th century Anglo-American eugenics tradition. And so really quickly, so I wrote a whole paper about this, but I'm going to really quickly talk about this. I'm not going to go through the whole paper. This paper we wrote with Emil Torres, who's a philosopher, called Eugenics and the Promise of Utopia Through Artificial General Intelligence. So the first thing to note is that when people think of eugenics, they don't think of it as a progressive movement that was thriving among scientific institutions, universities, students that consider themselves progressive, social justice, right? That is not what people think of when they think of eugenics. Actually, how many people have heard the term eugenics? I'm assuming a lot of people have, right? Show of hands. Okay, yeah. So so you have heard of it. People think of eugenics as exclusively related to Nazi Germany. But it wasn't exclusive to them because, and they also think that it ended after World War II. And none of those things are true. So first of all, the Nazis studied California's sterilization program. California was a huge eugenics hub. Stanford University was a huge eugenics hub. If you read, there's a book called Palo Alto. It's a huge book if you have time that goes into this. And California's sterilization program continued until 1979. And the British Eugenics Society lasted until 1989, and they changed their name to Galton Institute and then to Adelphi Genetics Forum in 2021. And Galton, I don't know if I have that here, Galton is the cousin of Charles Darwin, and he is the person who coined the term eugenics. And unfortunately, he's also, the founder of modern statistics. So there's a really great article about how so many of the metrics that we use in statistics are just very much inspired by eugenics, Pearson correlation coefficient, a whole bunch of these things. So like I said, the Nazis studied California's sterilization program, and that's what they started using as a template for their racial, quote unquote, racial hygiene policies that eventually led to the Holocaust that we all know about, and that is absolutely horrific. So as I mentioned, Stanford, I didn't even know this, was a huge eugenics hub. And the first president of Stanford, David Starr Jordan, was one of the most powerful eugenicists of the 20th century. And there's this, excuse me, this group called the Stanford Eugenics History Project that is trying to raise awareness about it and kind of change the naming of buildings. For instance, imagine when I was going there, there was Jordan Hall, there was like, I think a library named after him and everything, and absolutely no mention of this. So this is a very quick overview of eugenics. Now let's talk about the test grill bundle, which is a term that my colleague and I, my collaborator and I, excuse me, coined. I'm also not going to go through this too fast. Too deeply, in too much depth. There's another talk that I gave, which is about almost all of it is on this topic. So the way eugenics works is that there are two tenets, two ways of doing it. Now let's see. Yeah. One of them is positive eugenics. And what that means is that you find the people that you find desirable and you encourage them to procreate and multiply, right? So that there's more of them. And eventually you will purify the human race or create some sort of superior race. The second one is negative eugenics. And negative eugenics means that you try to get rid of the people that you find undesirable, or the qualities that you find undesirable. And you do that, you get rid of the qualities you find undesirable by sterilizing the people that you think have those undesirable qualities. And that's the miscegenation, anti-miscegenation law. So you can't marry cross races. Those are the sterilization laws that we also had until pretty recently in California. And so now the second wave eugenics starts with transhumanism. And the most famous transhuman currently, I would say, is Nick Bostrom, is a philosopher. He's also an extropian. I'll go a little bit through them. So transhumanism was born mostly out of the eugenics movement. The word transhumanism itself was coined by Julian Huxley, who was president of the British Eugenics Society from 1959 to 1962. So transhumanism is not even about creating a superior human race. It's about creating a different race altogether, a different race that is better than humans, so post-humans. And post-humans have a whole bunch of qualities, like maybe they live really long, like hundreds of years. Maybe they don't ever have disease of any kind. Maybe they have X-ray vision. I'm not sure, but that's the idea of post-humans. So the idea is not just to aim to improve the quote unquote human stock, but transcend humanity altogether. And in extropianism, there are 5 fundamental principles: boundless expansion, self-transformation, dynamic optimism, intelligent technology, spontaneous order. Then there is a singularitarianism. I don't know how many of you have heard about the singularity. I'm not sure if that's super popular right now. Can I see a show of hands if you've heard about the singularity? Okay, a few people. I think this was much more popular in around 2017, 2016. Ray Kurzweil, who works at Google, was talking very much about the singularity. And the idea of the singularity is that there's a number of ways it could happen, but that you will have some sort of intelligence explosion where you don't know what's going to happen afterwards. Things multiply very fast. Things recursively get much better. You'll have super intelligent technology, and you can't even imagine after this horizon. You can't even imagine what's going to happen. Then there's the cosmos. So these are kind of very much overlapping communities. Most of the founders of each of these communities are either multiple founders of multiple communities, or are, I don't know, intertwined in them, or they join, they start in one community and then they join and they leave, etc. Then there's the cosmos. So cosmism and there are early Russian scholars, but I'm talking about now cosmos, like Ben Goertzel. So he is the first, the author of this 2007 book on AGI, the first book on trying to popularize AGI. So Ben Goertzel is a cosmist. And so the cosmos goal is it's to think about transhumanists, what transhumanists do in the cosmos, not just to create a post-human, I guess, superior race, but to colonize the cosmos and to do what they call paradise engineering. These are like the words from Goertzel. Goertzel has a paper called the Cosmos Manifesto. So when they were writing about AGI, in many of his writings, he calls it actually transhuman AGI, not just artificial general intelligence, but transhuman artificial general intelligence. But it's not just to colonize space, right? It's to expand. Remember boundless expansion from the extropians? It's also to get to the cosmos. So a really quick AGI history, right? So a bunch of guys, right, all men, decided to have a meeting. They called it a summer meeting to study quote unquote AI. There's already a bunch of politics there. They didn't want certain people there, so they wanted to call it something different from what it was called before, et cetera, et cetera. And so the term AI was officially coined. But what happens is that there's often what they are called AI summers and AI winters. So AI summers are times when everybody's talking about AI. There's all of this hype around it. There's a lot of funding thrown in the field. And then AI winters are when people get disappointed, right? You know, you have all of these promises that are made. It's going to change humanity and all of that. And then people see that a lot of the people who are promising all of these things are not living up to the hype. And so there's all these AI winters. So what happens is that many researchers dissociate from AI. So like at Stanford, you know, there was the AI lab, and in the AI lab, there are natural language processing, computer vision, robotics, logic people, etc. But so when I was doing my PhD, right, I never, not once, called myself an AI researcher ever. Like we didn't realize we were AI until recently when it started becoming cool to call yourself AI, right? So a lot of people would be like, oh, I'm not the AI. I'm not like the AI person. Don't associate me with a lot of hype and unfulfilled promises, right? That happens during the AI winters, right? So people are like, nope, I do computer vision. Nope, I do machine learning. No, I do NLP, natural language processing. I'm not an AI person. So don't associate me with that overhype. And so then in 2007, so 2007 was still like, you know, the term AI was not very popular, right? Later on, there was big data and all that, but it was still not like everything was an AI. So in this book, Ben Goertzel, the Cosmos, the sea and test wheel, they and Penikin, they christened the term AGI, as they say. Then there was this organization called Mary, that's short, founded by Yudovsky to make AGI safe. That's what they say they want to do it. Then there was Deepmind, founded with the same goal, and they were funded by these billionaires in this bundle, and they met each other in these, you know, singularity talks and all of that. Then there's 2014 Bostrom's book called Superintelligence. Basically, Bostrom says we will either have, we can both have utopia and apocalypse. We'll have utopia if we build superintelligence and we build it the right kind, the benevolent kind. And if we have the devil kind, we'll have apocalypse. Then Deepmind gets bought by Google, and the people who founded Deepmind just freak out and say, oh my God, we can have utopia or apocalypse, but Google is going to become the one controlling it. We need to have our own. And then they start OpenAI 2015. And OpenAI was started as a nonprofit, and it, later became basically a capped for-profit. And that brings us to now, where we have 1 million AGI AGI focused organizations, whether it's think tanks or other multi-billion-dollar companies, or just hype, or whether it's news stories, etc. I think right now AGI is something we talk about all the time. Now, there are two conversations that happen in terms of AGI, the artificial general intelligence. Again, people say if we build it, if we build the right kind, we will have utopia. I don't know how, but world peace, everybody's going to get so rich, etc., etc. If we don't if we don't do that, then we'll have apocalypse, because it's going to render humanity extinct. So I think these are two sides of the same coin, because it's often parroted by the same people. And so the AGI race is very dangerous, because it's created a race to the bottom where people are building larger and larger models, putting lots and lots of resources, and they are building models that are basically able to advertise as being able to do everything for everyone. I'll talk a little bit about that later. So here are some of the things they say, right? Like Sam Altman, who's founder of OpenAI, one of the co-founder and CEO of OpenAI. He says, I think AI is going to be the greatest force for economic empowerment, and a lot of people are getting rich we've ever seen. He says the changes coming are unstoppable. If we embrace them and plan for them, we can use them to create a much fairer, happier, and more prosperous society. The future can be almost unimaginably great. This is what a lot of people, the singularitarians, I would say. Now, some people are getting rich, right? Let's see who is getting rich and who is not. So some people are getting rich. It's raining money for, let's say, OpenAI and similar organizations. However, a number of other people are not. And so this is an article I wrote with Milagros Micheli, who is a sociologist who studies data labor. And, excuse me, I need some water, sorry. And Adrian William, who's a research fellow at DAIR, who was an Amazon delivery driver. So Adrian has a lot of lived experience on what it's like to be algorithmically managed and etc., exploited as a labor, as a worker. And so with these, with these two, we wrote this book. We wrote this article called The Exploited Labor Behind Artificial Intelligence. And this was more of a synthesis of our research and a lot of other people's research. So the crux of the matter is that when we talk about superintelligence, we are very much obfuscating the number of humans involved in creating these systems, right? And the amount of grunt work that they do, and the type of PTSD they get when they do these kinds of work. So for example, there was just this article by Billy Perigio for Time Magazine. Who has seen this article? Show of hands. Oh, basically no one. Okay, I'll talk about it. So Billy has been doing very good work in exposing exploitative labor behind social media platforms like content moderators, and in this case, people working on labeling data for AI systems. So in this case, these are people who are working on OpenAI's DALL-E, that is the text-to-image generator system they have. And what these workers in Kenya were doing was that they would filter out the most horrific, gory images that are generated, so that a filter could be trained that doesn't have those images for the rest of us, right? So they're basically the first responders trying to keep us safe from on these platforms. But they were paid peanuts, and they were left with all sorts of issues, including PTSD. And I want to play this for you. And I'm gonna see if I can play it and if you can hear it.
Anytime you've used ChatGPT and it doesn't...
Can you all hear it? Do you hear it? Not right now, but when I played it, you heard it? Okay, so I'm gonna play it.
Anytime you use ChatGPT and it doesn't spit out hate speech or extreme violent or pornographic content, it's partly thanks to Alex and his colleagues in Kenya.
What their contribution was basically making ChatGPT safe for tens of millions of users. They went through and reviewed really toxic, grotesque content day in and day out to make sure that no one else would ever have to see it.
Now, Alex and his coworkers are ready to talk about what they say that job has cost them.
It was very graphical. You can't start reading the text and ignore thinking of what is happening.
I had nightmares. I feared people. I feared walking in the dark.
I'm very proud that I participated in that project. Now ChatGPT is safe. But now the question I always ask myself, was my input worth what I received in return?
So that's an excerpt from that's an excerpt from a podcast that Karen Howe. It's based on Karen Howe's article. It's a similar article as to what Billy Perigio wrote, and it was really heartbreaking. I think it's different to read these articles, but when you talk to the workers themselves, and I've talked to a number of them, you realize, I don't know. I think it's hard to understand the extent of it until we hear their voices. One of them in this podcast said that he only worked on it for 5 months. And after that, he had so much PTSD, he couldn't even get close to his wife. His wife left him with their child, and he's still trying to get help, and he still hasn't gotten help. So that is what is happening in the quest to build AGI. Now, like I said, there's two sides of the same coin. There's the AGI utopia that is promised to us, and then there is the AGI apocalypse that is promised. That is, not promised, but a lot of people talk about, which is that it could render humanity extinct somehow. I never understand the argument, but notice that when people have those arguments, they're not talking about the kind of issues I just mentioned, like the workers who are getting PTSD or getting exploited. But the other thing that this kind of AGI apocalyptic talk does is it allows people and entities and corporations to evade accountability. So when you are talking about a system as if it has its own agency, what you're doing is you are allowing the organizations that are creating the system and deploying the system to abdicate responsibility, right? We're not thinking about a bunch of regulation, or we're not thinking about holding companies accountable or governments using it or whatever. We're talking about like the system that is built as if it's its own thing. And we ask, oh, can you make AGI ethical? Well, no, because that's just a thing. We got to talk about the people building it. So the reason I have this example here, excuse me, this is an example by Carla Ortiz, who's an artist, and she's one of the plaintiffs in a lawsuit against a number of companies that are building these text-to-image generators. And so one of the ways in which people I can never say this word properly, anthropomorphize these systems, like make them sound like humans, is, like I said, by ascribing agency to them. And so one of the ways in which people justify these text-to-image generators is by saying that they are inspired by the training data. So these text to image generators, right, are trained, or image to image generators. You know, these are the ones where you put in a name of an artist or something, and you can generate an image in the style of an artist or a cartoon or whatever, right? And so they say that these models are inspired by their training data, just like you and I are inspired, or artists are inspired by other artists or something like that. And a lot of artists find this line of, especially working artists, find this line of arguments very offensive, right, and inaccurate. And so here, Carla's talking about how artists bring their own technical knowledge and problem-solving experience, thoughts, lives into each artwork. It's very difficult to create work that looks exactly like your inspirations. It's very difficult to actually faithfully plagiarize. But here she shows these examples. One is the actual photo, and the other one is the generated one from one of these text-to-image generators, which are almost exactly the same. So basically, what she's saying is that these image generators are created by exploiting so many artists' work without their consent or compensation, and by not acknowledging that and anthropomorphizing these systems by saying that they are inspired. We are actually, our attention is directed away from the organizations that we should be holding accountable to make sure that they do only opt-in data training, for instance, that the artists that they take data from opt into it and are appropriately compensated, and they don't have to give up their data if they don't want to. So going back to Sam Altman, he says, you know, the future can be so good that it's hard for any of us to imagine. My basic take on this is that we'll have unlimited intelligence and energy, and all that will unlock, but the risks grow with the upside. And he says he thinks we'll have these before the decade is out. A while ago, Yudovsky had said that the singularity was going to happen in 2025 or something like that. Now, my question is, so going back to the 5 fundamental principles of extropianism: boundless expansion, self-transformation. So these are the ideologies that are driving our current most popular tech systems, right? AGI-based systems. So what if we had a bunch of other ideals instead, right? What if we, now that we know the ideologies that are at the root of this, we don't have to do that, right? A lot of students come into the field of AI, and they just do what everybody else tells them to do, or what there's funding for, or whatever. They don't necessarily know what the root ideologies are that are driving these things. But now that we know, we can say, okay, that's not what I want. That doesn't align with my values. What aligns with my values? For me, I'm thinking, instead of boundless expansion, how about enough, right? Like, let's say when you're going out to eat with your friends, you're all sharing, or you eat some and then that's it. You're not trying to take everyone's food, right? You're not trying to just expand forever beyond your place and then the cosmos and then the universe, etc. Why do we have to colonize everything? Why don't we just coexist? Why are we trying to create a superior post-human or whatever? Why can't we just create tools for humans? Why do we want to centralize power, right? Why do we want organizations that try to do one thing for everyone, lots of power and money? Why not distribute power? And, you know, for me, it's like, why not think about just being human? These are kind of the ways in which I want to do my work. These are the ideologies this is what I want to be driven by. So if this is what we're thinking, then one of the first things we want to think about, those of us who are researchers, is, okay, how do we do research then if we don't want to do it the way that it's being done before? Some of you might know or might have experienced that research can be a very exploitative process, right? I'm glad that a lot of PhD students are unionizing, because the PhD experience is an incredibly exploitative experience. Many times there are things that people call parachute research, where some communities go into other communities and they're like, quote unquote, study them. And they do this by taking their data and taking their knowledge and not giving anything back. And the researchers get famous, or they get tenure, or they publish papers, etc. But those they've quote unquote researched end up having nothing left. So at DAIR, the first thing we did was we worked on a research philosophy, and we treated this as a research project itself. And we published, we have our research philosophy on our website. Excuse me, I had to take another sip of water. And so you can read our research philosophy. Each of these are expanded upon, but we came up with 7 principles. One is community, thinking about people, right? Start with people. And we want to reduce the distance between researchers and community collaborators. So we don't want to have this really, this distinction between the researcher and the researched. And that's why in our work, in our institute, we don't just have computer scientists and engineers and sociologists, for instance, so it's interdisciplinary by discipline, but we also have people who are labor organizers and activists and journalists and refugee advocates. And those people are people who have gained their knowledge through their experience, not necessarily through a PhD. Trust and time, and that's about, if you're in academia, or if you're in publishing and research in general, there's this whole publish and perish culture, which is just really is not conducive to doing quote unquote ethical research, right? Because all you're doing is trying to publish a paper and move on. Knowledge production, this is what I mean by, valuing lived experience and different ways in which you acquire your knowledge equally. Redistribution, which is redirecting resources to fund community-led research. So if we're working on something that is very much related to a specific community. So for example, we had this one project about spatial apartheid, which I'll talk about. Then we want most South African apartheid, studying South African apartheid through computer vision. Then we want the people who are leading that project to be people who have that experience first and foremost. The rest of us can act like, support staff, but we don't want to be the ones driving it. Accountability, keeping ourselves and our research true to our communities. I actually not exactly sure how to hold ourselves accountable. It sounds kind of like self-regulation, which I don't think works. So I think that's the one we have to kind of figure out. Interrogating power. So always questioning the power dynamics and who has power, and imagination, daring to imagine better tech and better futures. So I want to give a few examples of this kind of work. This one is not from our team. This one is from University of Chicago. It's a team that created this app called Glaze. And what this app does is, so I mentioned some of the issues with image generators that our artists are facing in the past. And so what this app does is it protects artists from exploitation. So it makes it such that if you are an artist and you create some sort of artwork, you can input it, you can pass it through this app, and this app uses adversarial training techniques to add noise to the image that is supposed to be barely perceptible, right? So it doesn't really change them, supposed to not change the makeup of the image that much. And so then once you do this and you have these image generators, and let's say I want to, I put in an artist's name and I say, draw me and give me an image in the style of this particular artist, it won't be able to do that. It's too confused, right? So this is protecting artists. And what I like about this work is not just the actual work itself, but it's how they did it too. In order to come up with this work, they first went to many, many town halls where artists were talking about the issues they face with these kinds of systems. They worked with over 1,000 artists, and they paid them appropriately to do so, to get their input and understand what they need before building the system. If you're interested in this in these kinds of systems, I guess broadly called generative AI, but we focus on image generators here. We wrote this paper called AI Art and its Impact on Artists. It is a collaboration with, almost half the people are artists. one anonymous. It's a collaboration between artists, sociologists, legal scholars, philosophers, computer scientists, machine learning. Yeah, we kind of outlined some of the issues that artists face here. Other work I want to talk about, the last work I want to talk about probably is this work with Asma Lashteka and Paul Anzuri. So I mentioned a little bit this drive to a one-size-fits-all, one model for everything approach in the field of AI. So like I said, a lot of that is driven by the whole AGI thing. Trying to build one thing that does everything. This example here is from Facebook. So they had this model and data set that was used to train and evaluate the model called No Language Left Behind, NLLB. And they say, 200 languages within a single AI model, right? One model for everything. A breakthrough in high quality machine translation. And so they say today, we're announcing an important breakthrough in NLLB. We've built a single AI model called NLLP 200, which translates 200 different languages with state-of-the-art results. Fewer than 25 African languages are currently supported by widely used translation tools, many of which are of poor quality. In contrast, NLLB supports 55 African languages with quote-unquote high-quality results. So the question is, what does high quality mean? So, Asma and Paul did this analysis. So let me just give you a couple of the results. And we're writing up a longer paper based on these results, but this is kind of a short workshop paper that talks a little bit about it. So first of all, when we look at the data sets that they use to train these models, and most of them, they don't tell you what the source is, but for those where they can tell us the source of the data, we look for, so we analyze 4 languages, 5 languages, 3 Ethiopian languages and 2 dialects of Ghanaian languages. So this is for 5. And we're going to add a couple, we're going to add Maori, we're going to have, we're adding some collaborators here to this work. So this one shows the sources for Amharic, and Amharic is one of the most widely spoken languages in Ethiopia. And you assume that if you're going to have training data for machine translation from Amharic to something, that most of your URLs where you get that data from would be in the country where Amharic is spoken, which is Ethiopia. But that's not the case here. That none of these have anything to do with Ethiopia. None of these URLs are Ethiopian. Now, the interesting part, is that not only that, but so we guessed, okay, if the source URL is not in Amharic, probably they're using machine translated data to train their machine translation system. So we found a lot of calls to Google Translate when we go to the websites, and a bunch of translations that are word for word Google Translate, word for word, which is, I guess, for those of you in machine learning, it's a fundamental tenet in machine learning that you don't train on your test data. You don't test on your training data or vice versa, right? Right. If you're going to build a machine translation system, you don't want to evaluate on a machine translated. You don't want your so this one is actually the evaluation data set. So let's say you build a machine translation system and you want to know how well it's doing. So let's say that there is Amharic, and then you want to know how well your machine translation system is translating it to English. You don't want to compare it to another machine translated system. You want to see how people who know this language, who speak this language, translated it, and then you want to compare to that. But what they're doing is their evaluation data set is itself machine translated. So they're saying our system, so if their system is just like Google Translate or something, or another machine translation system, they'll say it's good. But if a native speaker, but if they compare it to like a native speaker or something, they might say it's bad, because that's not how they're evaluating their system. The other analysis that we did was to look at their system and the accuracy of their system as compared to these smaller organizations. So the two co-authors here, Paul and Asma, both have small organizations. Asma has a machine translation organization that is only focused on like 2 or 3 Ethiopian languages. Paul has a machine translation organization that is only focused on a couple of Ghanaian organizations. That's very different from the one-size-fits-all approach, right? That's very different from having one model that can translate 200 languages, whatever. One of them is working on literally 2 or 3 languages. The other one is working on 2 or 3 languages. They both know these languages. They both know these contexts. And whenever they make money, it's the speakers of these languages that make money. And they're not trying to take over the world, right? They're not trying to have a one big model for everything. And they're not trying to have all the resources to do this work. And so when we compare this one model for everything translation system to their systems, I mean, so this is for the Ghanaian languages, Twi, the 2 Twi dialects. We compare, so Kaya is the one from Ghana NLP, and Blue Score, so if the higher number means more accurate in this case. So you see that NLLB, Blue Score, when you look at it for colloquial language, the NLLB is very low, like 1.17 in this case, right? Versus 15, for instance. And the news is much better, but most people are interested in colloquial language and in translation. So what happens? I'm gonna skip this one. What happens is that this hype is number one, results in subpar work, subpar products, right? If you're doing one size fits all, you're gonna not focus on the people that you think are not important. So it results in subpar products for many, many people. However, the hype that you solved this thing for everything also makes it such that these smaller organizations lose funding. So what happened, Asma here was saying that once people saw the reason we were even analyzing it, once people saw this NLLB thing, a lot of potential investors in his company decided to pull out, and they said, no, sorry, you should close up shop. Facebook has solved it. And the truth is Facebook hasn't solved it, but even if Facebook did, the people who would benefit from whatever Facebook did would not be the speakers of those languages, right? There wouldn't be the people who are supplying the data. And so I think that for me, I want to support smaller distributed organizations rather than this one size fits all approach. So here is, what Asma Lash said. He said, oh no, why am I looking at my calendar? I'm sorry, guys. What is happening here? I don't know what happened. I'm almost done. Let me get my slides again. I am almost done. That's the good part, but I have no idea what happened. Sorry. Okay. That's so weird. I don't know what happened. Okay. Play. Okay, now we're, oh no, this is not it. So weird. I don't understand what I even pressed for that.
Take your time. We have food here. People can eat.
So, like, I have no idea what happened for that to happen. Okay, I'm back. I'm gonna share my screen. And then I'm going to go back to where we were and then like try not to press anything. All right, we're here, right? Okay, we're good. Right. So Asma says, we don't believe that you can create just one model that solves these problems. If your native language is one of these, so he's specifically talking about African languages, but I think this applies to anyone and any task, not just language tech. If you have the technical know-how around machine learning and you care about your community and the kind of problems they want to solve, that unique advantage and connection to the community can carry you further. And I truly believe this. Sometimes people get demoralized because they see how many resources these models like ChatGPT take to train or to evaluate, and how much money these companies have. And that can be demoralizing for people who might not necessarily want to jump on that bandwagon. But I really truly believe that we can make small, less, lower resource, task specific models and systems in general, and we can have many different. I would rather live in a world with many different organizations serving many different communities than like one giant org that profits from everybody in the world. So I guess I'll say I believe that trying to build AGI, artificial general intelligence, is an inherently unsafe practice, starting from the fact that we can't even scope it as an engineering, as engineers when we're trying to build something. We can't say, what exactly does this do? What is the input? What is the output? What is the behavior, expected behavior? What is not expected behavior? What are the outlet? We can't even do that. We can't even define it or scope it. And so I think we should build well-scoped, well-defined systems instead. And I don't think we should try to build a god. And going back to the imagination part, our technological future is not set. There are many possible futures, and that's created by people like you, right? The current technological reality we're seeing is because of who has money and whose imagination and ideology is being executed. And we can have a different path. And so to me, this is me when I was, I think, 4. That's my grandma. And one of the ways in which we're trying to do this imagination is thinking about, we had this series called the Possible Future series that will come out hopefully in the new year. And these are short pieces where we imagine a different future, and we try to then say, okay, like, what do we need to do to make that a reality? So I was thinking, what would an internet that my grandmother would have enjoyed and would have been useful for her look like? My grandmother did not read or write in any language. She did not speak English. She spoke Tigrinya. And she lived in a country, Eritrea, where now this country has the lowest internet penetration rate in the world. It has a government that can do whatever it wants with the internet. It can shut it down. It can, whatever. Why can I not think about what would an internet that would give her joy look like? Maybe it's something where she doesn't have to type every time. Maybe she can just speak to it, right? Maybe there's some sort of speech recognition component. Maybe there's automatic machine translation so that she doesn't necessarily have to speak a particular language to interact with the internet. She doesn't have to change who she is. And so I want to encourage all of you to think about, what is your possible future, right? And so with that, if you're interested in contacting us, these are all of the details, and I know I'm not there in person. So if anybody wants to, if you have, want to email me or something, feel free to do that. And yeah, I think that's it. We can take questions.
Okay. Erin, if you have, I think I'm trying to figure out the best way to do questions with folks online and then with folks in the room. So maybe we can alternate. And does anyone have questions in the room? Okay, Jack's going to ask those questions.
Okay.
So I'm a faculty who likes teaching algorithms, and so I resonate very much with solving well-posed problems, and some of the students in here know that. But the attempts to the recent attempts at artificial general intelligence have sort of revealed that by collecting a lot of data and then having machines analyze this data, you can wind up solving problems in ways that you never expected them to be solved. And so a lot of these things are not well posed because you're discovering things in huge mountains of data. How does that fit in with what you said about engineering solving well-posed problems?
Can you give me an example of what you mean?
Well, I mean, I was just very surprised.
For example, you were saying that there are, when you have lots of data, you can solve things in ways that you don't know. And
well,
so
I just some of the advances in NLP, just by having very large corpuses that I mean, as someone who I graduated from Stanford in 1990, the artificial intelligence group back then just never had those possibilities of analyzing such large amounts of data and finding patterns in the data where they didn't know what patterns they were looking for.
Yeah, I think that there are a number of things, right? Like they are, so for example, my PhD thesis was on analyzing lots of 50 million images to find patterns in the data. And I could find correlations of things. I think, you can analyze, you can take pattern recognition to a particular limit. But the issue is when people mistake that for something else, or when they take a leap of faith, when, I don't know, there's a term measurement construct, right? Hannah Wallach and Abigail have this paper called, I don't know, I think fairness and measurement construct or something, which is what we think we're measuring, what our experiments tell us versus what we extrapolate, what we think we're measuring. That's my issue. My issue is when we say, oh my God, these things have learned how to do chemistry and all of that, when we haven't even figured out whether we're training on our testing data or not. I mean, whether we're testing on our training data or not, because we don't even know what the training data is. And a lot of the times right now with things like ChatGPT, yes, we are testing on our training data. When people use words like emergence or phase change, which is a specific term in physics, very well defined with theoretical groundings, by just looking at 3 different lines in a graph, and it looks like it's first going, oh, I forgot that you guys can't see me. I'm making gestures. So by first, you have this horizontal line, and then it's like the slope changes. There was just this other paper from Sami Coelho and his, I think, postdoc students that showed that a lot of these papers talking about emergence or phase change don't necessarily make sense. Like, they're not really well grounded, right? So I mean, I think that there is a place for, large scale pattern recognition. I just don't think that's AGI. That's my point of view. I'm not saying that people just should not do, any neural network space stuff or but I think that it has gone to an extreme. And I know that, like, in the past decade or so, at least when I noticed the papers coming out, it was more and more end-to-end and less putting in human knowledge or human experience. So for example, so people tried to do like end-to-end, right? And so more and more papers were like, oh, there was this part of the pipeline where you had to put in your knowledge of the situation, and now you don't even have to do that anymore, kind of thing, right? Even when you look at convolutional neural networks, people built them by understanding, what kinds of properties images have, for instance, and even that is no longer in existence. So I think that when these things are like in the quote unquote real world, there are other kinds of things we should take into consideration rather than just, numbers, one singular number of accuracy on a particular test set.
Ryan, do you have questions?
I have a question.
Hi, I can hear you.
Hi. Okay. So first I want to say thank you so much for sharing all of your knowledge. I really enjoyed your talk. My name is Gabriella, and I'm a sophomore studying computer science, and I'm really passionate about ethics in AI. And I'm wondering if you have any advice about navigating career avenues in AI that align with my own moral values, like what you talked about, because sometimes it seems like the only practical avenue is going into big tech, which I don't really think those corporations care so much about the ethics of what they're doing. So I was wondering if you had any advice about that.
Yeah, so, many times when I speak to undergrads, I see that they're much more ahead of institutions and the dominant prevailing things that's happening. Many times students are very much ahead of everybody else. So I get it. I get your feeling. I get how you're feeling. I also feel like you should not put the world's weight on your shoulders. So you don't have to solve everything at the same time. So there are, I think that some of us need to work harder to provide opportunities for people like you to provide what is it called, alternatives, right? To provide alternatives for people like you, right? Because it seems like there are very few of these alternatives, but now I think there is a growing ecosystem of what is called public interest tech, and I'm hoping that there will be more of them. So that we can indeed have these alternatives. But the other thing I want to say is that even if you go into a big tech or something like that, you can, make a difference. And the way to do that is by collective organizing. So if you think of it as a collective process where you have a bunch of people that are pushing for a particular change or particular way of doing things, then it's not just, you yourself, like sacrificing yourself, right? So when I was a lot of things I've done have been like that. So for example, this conference ACM conference on fairness, accountability, and transparency was founded in 2018. And at that time, I had no idea that there was this paper I was writing with Joy Bolamini called Gender Shades. It ended up, getting a lot of attention. And it was the paper showing the disparity in error rates in face recognition between a bunch of different groups, but especially between lighter skinned men and darker skinned women. And on darker skinned women, these professional, these face recognition systems that are sold by like Microsoft and all these organizations, like IBM, for instance, almost the darker and darker you go, it almost approached random chance, like it didn't work, right? And on lighter skinned men, it was like almost 100% accurate. And the repercussions, we talked about the repercussions of these people being wrongfully arrested, etc. Like I had absolutely no idea. I mean, I was advising her on her master's thesis at the time, and I had no idea if we could even publish that kind of work. And and I was on the steering committee first, and then on an executive committee of the conference FACT, which allowed us to publish that kind of work, which was, significant because I now could have a place where I could publish that kind of work. I mean, the paper that got me fired from Google, I published there too. And so that was a collective effort, right? And then when I was at Google, when I got fired, I mean, things could have ended up very differently. Like I think they could have they could have succeeded in really ruining my reputation and my career, and they weren't able to do that because so many people galvanized on my behalf, and many of those people were people internal to Google, and they could not be super public about it. But behind the scenes, a lot of people were working hard, including my own team and including so many different groups of people. So I was able to do that because I had a network. So I think that whatever you do, wherever you decide to go, I think it's good to have that kind of network, because to be honest, I mean, I'm super happy I have DAIR. Actually, especially now, I don't even know how I would every few months that passes, I'm like, well, if I wasn't fired then, I'd definitely be fired now. I'm like, there's no way I would have lasted this long. But it's, I still have to maintain a lot of network organization, because if you are at Google, sure, you can lose your job. If you have a nonprofit, you can lose your funding. And that's not just your job, it's your a whole bunch of people's work, jobs, that livelihood that you're now responsible for. So it's not like it just goes away, right? And if you're in school, if you might not have it. If you're in university, you might not have tenure. And if you get tenure, then you might not have the next thing. I don't know. So there's always something to lose, and so I think that it's very important to just have a network of people, like-minded people with the same goals that you help organize with. And when I was your age, I made the rounds of tech. I really drank the tech Kool-Aid when I was at Stanford. Like, wow, Silicon Valley is the best ever, and this and that. Because there was a lot of work that I wasn't familiar with, that I didn't read all those critical texts. And so I was at Apple. I mean, I almost quit Apple too. There were some horrible things that happened there. Then I just tried to find my way. I really meandered for a long time. So the other thing is that I really think the one thing I want to say is that you should remember that wherever you end up doesn't necessarily have to be forever. And you also don't know the ways in which your experiences shape each other and influence each other. You can't necessarily predict that beforehand. So my degree is in electrical engineering. I first studied analog circuit design, and then I worked in audio circuitry doing analog circuit design. Then I went to do device physics, which is a bit more physics. Then I started doing optics. Then I left the whole PhD and did a startup and some random thing. And then I, went back and I had a crisis of like, oh my God, what am I doing in my life? And then I did computer vision. And then I kind of veered off into this thing that feels kind of different, So right now, I would say, and maybe there's some electrical engineers here who might see that my training as an analog circuit designer really influences a lot of the ways I think right now in terms of the field that I'm currently in, and I couldn't have predicted the ways in which that would influence it. So for example, all of this stuff I said about well-scoped systems, etc., my experience shipping products and stuff has a lot to do with it. And my experience in EE and circuit design has a lot to do with it. This paper I wrote called Data Sheets for Data Sets is specifically, inspired by data sheets for electronic components, right? So I think that, my only advice is that it's really good to keep a network and to organize wherever you are. You can make a difference right in your school where you are, can make a huge difference. Even now, you can make a difference in big tech. You can make a difference in government. Now, there's a number of, I started to see a number of government fellowships too, for people with a technical background to work in government for a little bit, if that interests you. And there are a growing number of institutes like mine, and unfortunately, not enough, in my opinion, that I think you can look at. And I would also think about academia too, but there's a lot of issues in academia as well, and it's very intertwined with the military and with big tech. So sometimes it feels like pick your poison, but I think you can really make a difference if you think of it as collective organizing.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
Hello, Dr. Gebru. Can you hear me by any chance?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can't see you though, but I can hear you.
I don't know if you can see me waving. I don't really know where the camera is, but my name's Ali Khatib. I'm a second year here at UNC studying computer science.
Can you
and
guys go
I'm
in the middle? I can see you if you're in the middle or in the first
I don't think so, but I'm waving to you.
Okay, I can't see you, but it's fine.
No worries, no worries. I'm interested to hear your perspective on the role of like intellectual property rights when it comes to discussing like generative AI and image generation in terms of like art. Sort of like interested on how we approach creative attribution and whether or not you think this work is like fundamentally derivative in nature. And then maybe more so on the artist side, how does that impact the artists that are, using these data sets, and what agency do they have over that use of their work?
Yeah, this is very interesting. I wrote that paper, AI art and its impact on artists, talks about it. But there's a legal section on copyright, on US copyright that was written by the legal scholar, in Mehtab, our collaborator. So, all of the stuff I know is from the artists, like what I've learned from the artists. And they are very much about protecting their intellectual rights. So I don't know if things have changed so far, but my understanding right now is that if you have an image generated, if you just like an AI generated thing, you cannot really copyright it, that. And currently, unfortunately, you people, the way things have been done has been to just scrape everything and use it as training data. So the artists really haven't had any agency. And I organized this panel, in fact, with a bunch of artists talking about how they felt doing this. And it's very interesting to see the difference, because the working artists are really feeling the impact. But if it's like academic artists, and sometimes there's like fine art artists and stuff, they're not really, I think, seeing the impact. So there's a difference in how people think depending on, I feel like, the economic impacts that they're having. And it was just heartbreaking for me to hear. So one woman talked about how this woman used her art to train in training. She did style mimicry, which means that she used one of these image generators to add the name of to generate an image in the style of a particular artist. And then she did that, and then she got an exhibition. And this artist was so upset. She's like, it's basically like theft. So a lot of them are working, there's a lot of discussions in terms of copyright. But I think Mehtab, our like I said, our legal scholar collaborator, her conclusion is that US copyright law is not well equipped to protect artists. The reason being that, first of all, a lot of these rulings take a long time, which is why I really liked the tool Glaze, because it allowed artists to protect themselves without waiting for some court ruling, and we don't know when it's going to come. The second thing is that if you're a small-time artist, you're already like, there's the starving artist stereotype already, and you're not going to have time and resources to go up against a multi-billion-dollar like corporation, right? And so relying on the courts is kind of like after the fact, means that the onus is on the artist to sue or to prove something. So I'm more in favor of regulation that puts the onus on these corporations before they train these models, before they put these models out there, that it has to be, number one, opt-in, not opt-out. That's a big difference. Opt-out means by default, they use your data unless you explicitly opt out. Doesn't really work. Opt-in means you don't use my data unless I opt in. They don't want that, right? And prove that you are not using copyrighted material, etc. I think that's what I'm for. And when people were showing, a lot of artists were nervous about the Spotify model for artists because some artists were talking about, I don't remember which company started advertising that they're now paying for artists each time someone uses their work to generate in the image generator or something like that. And this guy talked about how much money he made, which was like basically pennies, right? Like one, I don't know, 100th of a penny per thing or whatever, which amounted after thousands of images, just like so, few pennies. So I think that the solution has to be putting the onus on the companies that are really profiting on this stuff to have documentation, to be transparent, to prove to us that they are not stealing data from artists.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
No worries. And if you're interested in more, you can read the paper.
Any questions from the folks in Zoom? It's your turn.
Hi, my name is Shanley Vong. I just want to say thank you again for just taking the time and speaking to us today.
Hi.
Oh, I don't know where the camera is, so I would like to wave.
I see you. You can just wave.
Hey.
Yeah, hi.
So again, my name is Shanley Vong. I'm a senior studying neuroscience and computer science with a minor in philosophy. And one of the things that you said that really resonated with me during your conclusion was that you mentioned the advancement of our tech should be geared towards our community and helping our community. And again, like for our community, as you kind of mentioned within DAIR's or like the distributed AI research organizations of research philosophy. So from your personal experience within research and within academia, what would you say are as a person, a researcher, a scientist, whatever you might say, are moral obligations to humanity in terms of AI, AIG, and also to like tech advancement overall? Thank you.
So I would say there are many, but unfortunately, when you are in a field that has a lot of money and power attached to it, the actual moral obligation stating that itself becomes very dangerous for you personally as a career in your career, right? And so that I think that's the first thing we should all be aware of, like that whenever you're trying to go against the grain, it's always gonna be with a cost, or unless that's why you want to collectively organize. So one of the things that is really awful about the field is that it is extremely tied to the military. The beginning, the goals, the money. I mean, most money in AI, if it's not like Google or Amazon, whatever, if it's not about like making as much profit as possible, it's about trying to build more and more efficient weapons. So there are, a number of books there. There is The Birth of Computer Vision that talks about this and the history of computer vision and American history. There is Machine Translation Shifts Power. That is an article that talks about how, again, the US wanted to spy on, Cold War, Russia, whatever. And that's why they were investing in machine translation. So those are just two examples. And excuse me. And then, if you look at self-driving cars, same, DARPA was the one that was funding it. And so a lot of times what happens is that these kinds of systems are developed and tested on populations that most people don't care about. So the US-Mexico border is one example. But Palestine is another example. There is a book called The Palestine Laboratory that came out by author, I think his name is Lowenstein. And it talks a lot about how there are so many surveillance, automated weapons, face recognition, etc., things that are that have been tested on Palestinians and then exported. So when we don't speak up about these things, because there is a cost, because it's uncomfortable, because, you know, we might lose things, we are proliferating these kinds of uses of technology, which is not what most of us want. Most people, I would say maybe like 90, I would guess to say like more than 90% of scientists and engineers do not go into this field wanting to work on some militaristic thing or whatever. But because the entire field seems to be, you know, it just feels like there's no way out because the funding is like that, the status quo is like that, etc. It's very hard for us to speak up. So I would say that, you know, if I were to think of a moral obligation, I mean, I guess this is very big. I think it's for us to extricate our field from weapons, military warfare, death and destruction. That is, if I had to choose one, that's what I would say.
Great, thank you so much.
And not just that, carceral systems, that's another one. Like it's just all about punishing, imprisoning people, you know, killing more people more efficiently, etc. So I would, you know, I would try for us collectively to figure out how we can extricate it from that goal.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can see you too.
Oh, okay. Hi. My name.
That's where the camera is. It's behind you.
Oh.
Yeah, no,
Yes.
actually, yes, there, like, no. yes.
Oh, okay, I see it now. Okay. But thank you so much for your talk. I thought it was really interesting portraying this issue from the frame of eugenics. Like, did not know that the history was connected at all. And coming from that perspective, you talked a bit about anthropomorphizing, so like adding humanistic characteristics to these technologies. And I was wondering if there are any pros to making these technologies more human, because I've read like some articles about how not necessarily like AI is going to take over the world, but like people believing that it can be very dangerous. So I was wondering, in your opinion, is there any pros to making AI or these technologies in general more human-like at all?
I really don't, honestly. I mean, I'm trying to think, but I can think of so many cons. And I've written about so many cons. One of them, so back to Joseph Weizenbaum, who created, I think, I don't know if it's the first chatbot, but the most definitely, I think it is the first chatbot, Eliza, right? And this was like late 60s, early 70s, I don't remember. But he was so freaked out by the way people interacted with this chatbot. This chatbot was rule-based, very simple, nothing like today's complicated ones. And a lot of people started to believe like they were like talking to a person. He wrote entire books about computing and the dangers of doing this kind of thing and AI and all of that. And now we're basically doing the same thing. And so, you know, the FTC in the US has started to write about deceptive practices because that is within their jurisdiction. And so they wrote a warning saying that AI companies, you know, are within their jurisdiction and you should not deceive customers as to the capabilities of these systems. And, you know, and so to me, there are a number of issues. When you are interacting with a system and they make you think that you're interacting with a human, and let's say it says extremist things or other awful things, you're thinking it's coming from a human. You're not thinking it's coming from like a corporation or something like that you're supplying data to. I mean, and there have been so many, there's even been one documented person committing suicide in Belgium, I think, after his interaction with the open source version of a ChatGPT type system. And so this is actually section 5 of our paper, Stochastic Parrots, right? Which is about how humans make meaning out of the text that we see. And we attribute intent, we attribute that, you know, it's coming from somebody else. And to me, it's even more dangerous when you make it look like not just a human, but a superhuman super being, right? Which is how many of these systems are advertised. They are advertised like they will tell you all the answers for all the questions. There's no, there's no confidence level. There's no, like Suresh, who's a computer science professor, in his interview said that for ChatGPT, for instance, it does the ... thing, so that the way you do when you're texting or in a text interface when you're talking to somebody else, there's the ... like you're, like it's thinking, right? That's deceptive. There is the I don't know, the ways in which it's talking. So I really think that is very dangerous. I don't think it's good. And I honestly can't think of instance. There might be like, very isolated instances where it might be a good idea to create a human-like thing. But we ended our paper, Stochastic Parrots paper, which got 2 of us fired, by saying literally that AI systems that mimic humans are a bright line in ethical AI. That's kind of one of the things we said when we ended. And so I think there's just many dangers. Like there's the whole e-girl thing. I don't know if you heard about it, that Mark Andreessen was funding, and when this one company saw like how people were reacting and they shut it down, these people were so upset that their e-girls were shut down. I mean, I just like, what does it do? What is it going to do to our human to human interaction? And so I don't know. I don't see any upsides to doing it that way.
Thank you.
Don't be shy. Oh, I can't hear you. Can you say it again? Can you speak again? Okay, I think I can hear you.
Okay.
Oh no, I can't hear you anymore. I still can't hear you. Can't hear.
One second.
I can hear now.
Oh,
Maybe don't do
ambient.
it with- Yeah, that's better. I can hear you.
Now better here.
I can hear you now.
Oh, okay, thanks. You can take my question. You were speaking about the test creel, transhumanism, etc. And you ended at positivism. There's like you mentioned rationalism, effective altruism, long-termism. Is there anything else that you would say as it relates to eugenics movement as well?
Wait, I heard bits and pieces of that. You said that I mentioned in the test creel bundles there's effective altruism, long-termism, and something about eugenics.
Yes, I was wondering if you could just expound more on those topics.
Yeah, so basically So long-termism, let's start, is so I said that transhumanism, Nick Bostrom is the most famous transhumanist. He's also a long-termist. Basically a big portion of the effective altruism movement has been veering towards long-termism. And the idea of long-termism is that we should think about the very, very, very far future. I don't even know how many millions, billions, whatever of years. And that that the most important thing to do right now is to secure the well-being of those potentially 10 to the 58 people that could colonize the cosmos. So nothing we do, they say, and many of the most important figures of long-termism, like William McCaskill, are also leaders of effective altruism. And they say nothing we do in the next 100 years is even really important when we think about what we should do in the world. We should even discount like what happens in the next 100 years. And so it has a lot of it has to do with transhumanism, colonizing like utility, yeah, right? Like we need to maximize some sort of utility, and so a lot of it is about maximizing our destiny, kind of. And so if you look at Julian Huxley, who coined transhumanism, there's like similar language too. And if you look at Nick Bostrom, he wrote Letter from Utopia, and in fact, if you look at Nick Bostrom's list of existential threats to humanity, one of them is basically dysgenics. That is the opposite of eugenics. Dysgenics means more undesirable people reproducing too much. So he calls it dysgenic pressures. He wrote it in a paper. And he said literally that it seems in some places intelligence is negatively correlated with fertility, and that might result in a different species which it's called Homo something, I don't remember, which means lover of many offsprings, right? So he's saying that if too many stupid people reproduce, that we will end up with a completely different species of a race of not even humans. So this is like very explicitly eugenics, right? And so there's many other examples. Like there was a time when in the effective altruism org, they piloted a score called the Peltiv score, and where they wanted to figure out who was desirable to recruit. And one of the ways in which that happened was looking at IQ scores. And there's a whole, his like IQ, using IQ to like, sort people is a very like, well-known eugenics thing. So, there's many of those kinds of links. And so, but in our paper, we, I would say we describe it a lot more. I don't know how to explain it a lot more. Yeah. Nick Becksteed, in his PhD thesis, literally wrote that it's better to give aid to richer countries. I'm sorry, I'm just going off. Are you about to ask a question? I see.
No, I want to hear what you have to say about this. This sounds very interesting. But after that, I'd love to.
Oh yeah, no, I have a lot to say. I'm just gonna say that like one of these people who was also, Sam Bankman-Fried was also, he's a hardcore utilitarian as well. Which is very much a eugenicist thing. And there's so many things. Like Nick Bostrom said that the Holocaust was merely a ripple in human history. because not every single human died, right? I mean, it's just like, yeah, so many of these things. And then Nick Beckstead wrote that, you know, it's better to give more money and aid or whatever it is to have more people live in quote unquote productive countries. And this idea of human living attached to their productivity of some sort or a particular utility of some sort is very eugenics. It's very much a eugenics thing. And a lot of disabled scholars especially have called it out many times. Yeah, I'm done. Sorry.
No, thank you very much. That was wonderful. I have another quick question about sort of like bias in AI and the way that that actualizes itself against already marginalized communities. I think there's of course like a lot more notably egregious examples of this sort of bias, whether that's like loan application reviews or like facial recognition and distinguishing between individuals. How do you see maybe these biases sort of like manifesting against these groups, sort of like more in the shadows? What are some more maybe not as notable ways that this bias and maybe the impacts of eugenics in this kind of like field would actualize itself?
I think the notion that saying that you have to break a few eggs to make an omelet, you know that saying, which is an awful saying, but it's basically like saying you have to sacrifice a few for the greater good kind of thing. I think that line of thinking and that line of argumentation is very pervasive in the tech industry. If you hear if you pay attention to the leaders and what they say, like for example, Sam Altman knows that there are workers getting exploited. Like all these articles have come out, right? But he's still saying that, oh my God, we're going to have utopia because you got to break a few eggs, right? It'll be good. Like it'll be good for everybody. So that kind of justification you'll hear from even regulating bodies. They'll say, we know that artificial intelligence has great benefits, but it may, so the language is like, it has great benefits, but it may pose harms. But actually, we know about the harms. It's the benefits we're kind of unclear on. We're still kind of trying to see the benefits, right? So at a meta level, I mean, yes, like you said, there are these specific instances. That line of justifying the people that are bulldozed over building these systems, I think it's very pervasive. And it's like you point to worker exploitation, they're like, yeah, but you point to artists, but yeah, but you point to like what about the fact that it's more racist for certain people, yeah, but that's really compared to the potential benefits, like that's not a big deal. So I think that's like kind of underlying it all. But the other thing is that when we are talking about AI, we are many times talking and quote unquote bias. We're many times talking about when a system doesn't work as intended. We're not talking about when a system works as intended and its harms. So, we talk about, for example, facial recognition systems, misidentifying Black people mostly. And we warned about this 5 years ago, and it started happening. And then, that used to try and identify who, supposed like criminals to be arrested, right? And that is talking about a misidentification or a mistake or an error. What about when it works as intended? When you have entire dragnets, surveillance dragnets over policed neighborhoods, we know who is going to be over policed so that their every move can be monitored and then they are, put in prison or something like that. This happens, this happens in Detroit. It's, I think, one of the most over policed cities in the US and has lots of face recognition systems. People have been talking about this with the Uyghurs in China. where you have face recognition systems that are trained to try and identify who is a Uyghur so that they can, limit their movement, right? And I mean, we don't have to go. I don't like it when people kind of point to China as if like as if this country doesn't have enough of it. But so those are the kinds of things I'm talking about. Apartheid South Africa. You don't even have to go to AI. Technological systems, and the more advanced they are, the more they are used to surveil, and that's still true whether they are accurate or not. And that's still true if you have a overall apartheid / carceral / war machine system. The more advanced your technology is, the more it's going to be used to advance those things. And that is still true whether the system has mistakes or whether it works as intended. So to me, when I talk about, I usually expand my vocabulary from bias to harms, right? And so that's what I would say that we should keep in mind.
Thank you so much.
Okay, Erin, we're set. Can you hear me?
It's kind of going in and out.
There's something.
I can hear you. I can hear it. If you stay right there.
Yeah, there's something. It's me. I know. Aaron, are there any other questions in Zoom world?
No other questions here unless anyone else wants to pipe up.
Okay. Well, I would like to thank Dr. Gebru for spending her evening with us. I think there's lots of giggles in here, lots of smiles, just like honest, like genuine and like awe of the work that you're doing, and how detailed and thoughtful you were with your responses. So we really appreciate you. And I think we could just give a little clap.
Thank you. And, if anybody wants to have a short meeting with me or anything, please email me because I know it's not the same when we do these things virtually. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. I will just say there is a ton of food left over, so please take food. I heard it's really good. And if you did not get your CLE, I'll put that on the screen as y'all are grabbing food and leaving. And otherwise, we're all good to go. And Dr. Gebru, thank you so much. You can have some time back in your evening.
Thank you. Have a good
Thank
evening.
you.
Bye.
Bye.